Mr. Upton for 5 minutes.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman, and again, I appreciate all the witnesses here on the panel, as well as obviously the first panel. You know, I particularly want to thank my Michigan colleagues here, Debbie Dingle and Tim Wahlberg, Chairman Shimkus and Walden for allowing this hearing to go forward. You can tell that there is quite a bit of interest to try and fix this problem, not only in Michigan, but around the country. And I guess as I reflect back on the last 5 or 6 weeks, there was a term that our local sheriff used, Rick Fuller, that this is Team Kalamazoo. We got a problem, and we got to deal with it. And let's take all the barriers down, partisan barriers, governmental barriers, and let's work together. And as Governor Snyder said when he's been there on a couple of occasions, remember, this is a very small town, Parchment. This is a textbook example about how we ought to work together. And as I talked to many of the residents delivering the water as they came to not only the high school but the church, people appreciated that. I didn't see a single disgruntled person. They recognized that there was an issue. On the short term, we're going to roll up our sleeves and deal with it. And we've got a long-term problem as well that, again, I'm convinced that we're going to work on this as well. And, you know, frankly, that was a big lesson that we learned from Flint. There were, you know, finger could have been and was pointed at all units of government. And it was Dan Kildee, the congressman from there, myself, Debbie Dingle, Tim Wahlberg, and others, our senators, that worked together to change the standard that forced EPA to acknowledge that they've got to be involved from the get-go, from day one. And again, that was my first question when we learned about Parchment. Votes are starting here on the House floor. Question, I guess, that I have for you, Ms. Isaac, and again, thanks for your work. You've been there a good number of times over the last couple of weeks. We've chatted on the phone. We've met at my office. You helped as we talked about my letter that we sent back on August 1st. We want to help the citizens everywhere where this can be identified. And how frustrating was it for you to sit in the first row knowing that now we have these draft numbers, this draft report indicating that the numbers could be as high as 53,000 per trillion versus the 70 in terms of the standard? What do we have to do? Where is Michigan on this standard at 70? Do you support EPA reviewing it to come down perhaps, using the evidence there? How do you deal with an issue like this in terms of the state? And I guess my last part of my question is, I just want to announce to folks that I've been working with staff and with my able colleagues, Dingle and Wahlberg, to introduce legislation that I hope to be able to introduce next week to include federal facilities dealing with PFAS so that everybody's on the same page. I've talked to the chairman, Mr. Walden. I would like to see this legislation move in this Congress to get to the president's desk. Again, I think we could see some strong bipartisan support to certainly move it out of this committee and to the floor and talk to the leadership. So look for that as a long-term issue. But back to my question before my time expires, how frustrating it is you to see these results that we frankly feared. We suspected when the numbers didn't come out right away, that we suspected that they may be way above the 70 parts per trillion. What is the state's response to this?
Well, we would characterize our response to that as that we are very disappointed in the pace of the DOD and bases to respond to testing. I know they've been asked, and that was the right thing, that they were asked by the DOD to test, but the response rate is slow. And that means to me, if I don't have results on a base, then I'm going to initiate testing around the base because I don't want to risk and wait for results, and I've done that multiple times already. What I mean is testing. I'm looking at exposure in private drinking wells. And I wish that the pace was faster. I know they're obligated to use CERCLA, but there are no time frames for those 8 steps. and you can remain in the investigation stage of CERCLA for a very long time. And so I would encourage them, as I do encourage them personally on the phone. We really need your results. I often hear that the bureaucracy is large, and it takes a long time to get things through the system. I actually understand that. They don't have an impart process. And so we are still in partnership because we need to be. We need to get the basis unified in the state to understand where water flows, geology, output. Those results help us determine if we need to test a river, we need to test for public health issues. So it's important to us that we get the results in a timely manner.
Gentlemen's time's expired. There are votes on the floor.